Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And I've been really looking forward to this lunchtime because I'm so excited to look at this question of individuality and of freedom. You know, as human beings, we are all different, we're all unique, we're all individuals, and that is something that is precious and beautiful and good. And so all of us, of course, we want to be free, and we want to be ourselves. And the question we're looking at today is, are we? How free are we really to be ourselves? And actually, what is it that sets us truly free to be ourselves? And to explore that, we're going to be looking at 3 films and my favourite story ever told. And between them, I need my clicker. Where did I put my clicker? Sorry. Here it is. Thank you. Between them, we're going to be answering kind of 3 questions that I think will help us to explore the bigger question. And the 3 questions are coming. The 3 questions are, what kind of freedom do we want? Secondly, are we loved as we are? And thirdly, where do we get our identity from? Where do we get our sense of ourself from? So to begin with, I would love to quote one of the most popular pieces of philosophy of the last few years on this subject of freedom. And it's captured how so many people feel about freedom that actually it's had over 6 million views on YouTube. I'm just going to read you some of what it says. The snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. It's time to see what I can do to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. No one singing along? It's Let It Go. It's from Frozen. Oh, brilliant. Here we are. Thank you so much, guys. It's from Frozen, and I think it really captures a lot of how we feel about freedom in our culture. So we think, you know, it's kind of beautiful. No right, no wrong, no rules, nothing to hold me back or get in my way. I'm just going to express myself. I'm just going to be myself, and I'm just going to let it go. And that's something beautiful. But I don't know if any of you have actually seen the film. I imagine some of you have. And if you have, you might have noticed the problem with this song. Because when she's singing this, what's actually happening in the film? For those of you who don't know, while she's singing this, Elsa is running away from her home and her kingdom and her little sister, Anna, and she's building herself a massive ice palace in the middle of nowhere so that she can live completely by herself. So the question is, does that set her free? Is she free because there's no one there to get in her way or stop her doing whatever she wants? And the question I'd want to ask you is, imagine if the film stopped there. Imagine if she goes, let it go, the cold never bothered me anyway. She kind of swishes her hair, she walks into the ice palace, and then the credits roll. How do you feel? Would you be kind of crying happy tears? Would that feel like an uplifting story about liberation? Or would it feel like actually a bit of a depressing story about isolation? Actually, a friend of mine tweeted ages ago with this playlist that he'd made, which is called Hit Disney Songs Whose Messages Outshone and Subsequently Undermine the Messages of the Films They're in. And this song was right on the top of his playlist. And you can kind of see his point, can't you? Because we love the song, it's a massive hit, because we love that idea of kind of expressing ourselves, nothing getting in the way, complete freedom. But then actually the message of the film is something very different. The thing that makes the kind of conclusion of the film feel meaningful and beautiful is actually Elsa and her sister being reconciled, coming back together. It's Elsa coming back and saving her kingdom and her people, not living on her own by herself and for herself. And actually, if you'll let me have a spoiler alert, what's so powerful about the end of that film is her sister Anna sacrificing herself to save her sister. Not Elsa sacrificing her relationship with her sister in order to sort of save herself. And I think that's a really important insight because it shows us that actually while in theory we love this idea that is so common in the culture today of kind of freedom being just doing whatever we want and no one getting in our way, actually when it comes down to it in real life or even just in a full-length story, we know that that doesn't really work. And actually, if all that freedom is the freedom to kind of be at the center of my own universe, to do whatever I want, I'm not sure that we actually want that kind of freedom. And this isn't just something that we sense in storylines, it's actually something that real psychologists have studied. There's a psychologist called Jean Twenge, which is an amazing name, and she's written a book, and the title is so good you don't even need to read the book. It's called Generation Me: Why Today's Young Americans Are More Confident, Assertive, Entitled, and More Miserable Than Ever Before. And surely that's just as true in the UK, isn't it? From the moment we go to school or in films and songs, we are drilled with this idea of self-confidence and assertiveness. But however much we believe in ourselves, however confident we are that this is me, Generation Me is not actually enjoying life very much. And why is that? There's a New York Times columnist called David Brooks who wrote an article where he argued that if we listen to what most kind of inspirational speakers say about being true to ourselves uncritically, we end up with a view of life, a vision of life that begins with self and ends with self. And he says that leads us eventually to an unconscious boredom, separated from the deepest meaning of life and the highest moral joys. Well, we hear this explained in a bit more detail by a brilliant thinker and author called David Foster Wallace. He was an amazing thinker and speaker before he died tragically a few years ago. But he says that the world of men and money and power hums merrily along in a pool of fear and anger and frustration and craving and worship of self. So what he's saying is there are all kinds of marketing executives out there who want to sell us a particular vision of freedom. Even though that vision of freedom ends up leaving us frustrated and angry and anxious. And the vision is a very let-it-go kind of freedom. He describes it as the freedom all to be lords of our tiny, skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. But he says there are actually different kinds of freedom. And he says that there are more important kinds of freedom, that the really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty, unsexy ways every day. That's an interesting idea, isn't it? And actually, all three of these people are drawing, none of them are Christians, these writers, but they're drawing, I think, on insights from one of the most surprising teachings of Jesus. You've got, I think, on your chairs, these uncover biographies of Jesus. If you just crack it open, if you're up for that for a second, we're just going to look at one sentence on page 42. Because on page 42, Jesus teaches something that's pretty weird, but I think it's actually behind a lot of the wisdom that we're seeing here, because if you look, it's kind of in the middle of the page, sentence number 35, on page 42 of these books, and he says this: whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. Do you see the paradox here? It's there in Frozen, it's there in Foster Wallace, in Brooks, very vividly here in what Jesus is saying. He's saying if we try and live for ourselves, if we try and save our lives, we actually find ourselves wasting our lives. We find ourselves frustrated and anxious and bored and miserable. But he says if we give our lives away, if we lose our lives for someone else's sake, if we give away control of our lives, we actually find that what we discover is real life. Real freedom, actually. He says that really we've got a choice. Either we can lose our lives willingly by giving away control to someone else, or we'll just end up losing it completely anyway. We can give our lives away to someone and find that actually we get it back transformed, or we can just try and cling on to it and watch it kind of slip through our fingers like sand. And Jesus is saying that this is true on a much deeper level than Foster Wallace or anyone realizes, because it's not just true sort of relationally with other people around us. Actually, primarily, he's saying it's true in relationship with him, with God. He's saying that real freedom doesn't come from kind of letting go of anyone and everything that might get in the way of us doing whatever we feel like. He says real freedom comes when we're able to let go of ourselves, when we're able to trust him and lose control and find real life in the process. Now, of course, by itself, that doesn't necessarily sound that liberating. It kind of sounds terrifying. And I think actually for it to be something that sets us free to be ourselves, there has to be another side to it. And that other side comes out brilliantly in another ridiculously catchy, ridiculously popular song from a film. So I'm just going to read you the lyrics from that for a minute. I'm no stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, because we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one will love you as you are. You probably... lots of you will recognize this. This is Me from The Greatest Showman. It is the hit single on the soundtrack album that has sold more copies than anything since The Sound of Music. And this song is entirely about this question of being free to be ourselves, isn't it? And this first verse, I think, is the kind of question that the whole song and the big catchy chorus is the answer to. So what's the question here? They are saying to her, hide away, because we don't want your broken parts. Run away. No one will love you as you are. And that is the question that the whole song is a defiant answer to. Are we loved just as we are? And that is why this song is a massive hit. It's not just because it's a catchy tune, it's because that resonates with us. All of us long to be loved just as we are. We need to be loved just as we are. And we know that we're not really free to be ourselves unless we're loved as we are, as ourselves. And to all of that, I just want to say, yes, absolutely yes. I think we are so right to want that. And we're so right to actually believe that it is possible. In fact, my only problem with the song is that I don't think it goes far enough. I don't think it goes deep enough. Because it's very interesting. The song is very kind of confident and bold. You know, I make no apologies. This is me. But at the same time, it's full of language about brokenness and scars and bruises. It's all about the flaws that she knows she has that make her feel like she can't really be loved as she is. And that's what makes the song poignant, isn't it? I mean, imagine that the lyrics instead were basically just like, I am perfect. Everything about me is perfect. So I deserve to be loved because I am absolutely perfect. Would that move us? Would it resonate with us? Would it kind of pull our heartstrings in the way that the actual lyrics do? Of course it wouldn't. What's so powerful about the song and actually about the film is the idea that even though we've got all kinds of flaws, we can still be loved as we are. But actually, what I find really interesting is that the film and the song tend to kind of stay on the surface. It kind of tends to dwell mostly on just appearances. You know, it's all about, I happen to be weirdly tall or have a weird amount of hair and I still deserve to be loved in spite of that. But as I'm listening to the song, I want it to go deeper than that. I don't want it just to focus on the kind of external imperfections that people see but actually should ignore. I want it to think about the things inside of us, the flaws inside of us that we're much more worried about, the things that we're actually ashamed of and we hope no one ever sees. Because if we don't go there, if we don't admit the reality of those things, then how are we ever going to be loved as we are? How are we ever going to be free to be ourselves? We will always be hiding. We'll always just be performing. And actually, I came across a blog a while ago on everyday feminism, which is actually kind of a real-life version of loads of the themes in This Is Me, but it's loads more powerful because it's actually loads more honest. The author, Kai, is kind of describing herself, what she was like as she arrived into the activist culture that the whole article is about. And she says that she arrived as a terrified, angry, suspicious, cynical yet naive teenager whose greatest secret desire was for a family that would last forever and love me no matter what. But then she says, yet I also knew that such a family could never exist, at least not for me. You see, I had another secret. Underneath all of my social justice punk bravado, I knew that I was trash. I was dirty and unlovable. I had done bad things to survive, and I had hurt people. Sometimes I didn't even know why. Now that's the real question, isn't it? Even on our worst days, even in the darkest bits of ourselves where we have said things or thought things or done things to people where we think, I don't even know why I would do that to someone, but we did. Even in that, can we be loved just as we are? Is there a family who will love us forever no matter what? Or do we have to keep running? Do we have to keep performing? So I want to say from these two films that I think our search for the freedom to be ourselves is really a search for a love like that. A love that loves us exactly as we are. And to go back to the paradox we saw in Frozen, a love that we can trust enough to give ourselves away to and realize that actually that has set us free. So the pressing question is, where can we find a love like that? And this is where my favorite story ever told comes in, because Jesus actually spent a huge amount of time with people a lot like Kai. There's a bit in one of the biographies of his life where Luke, the historian who's describing it, says the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. So a bit of context, first century Israel was a society actually a lot like ours today, which is highly moralistic. There were some crimes or sins where if you have done that, that is unforgivable. You cannot shake the shame if you're guilty of that. And so, for instance, tax collectors were people they were absolute traitors to their own people because they were working for the oppressing Roman Empire. They were often creaming money off the top for themselves as well. They were the ultimate traitors. They were unforgivable. They were blacklisted. And then Luke says there's these other sort of general sinners, other people who are in this category of having done things they're seen as unforgivable, shameful, blacklisted. So they're a lot like the kind of circus troupe in Greatest Showman. But actually, like Kai, these are people who know that they have done bad things and they have hurt people. They are under no illusions about that. But they cannot get enough of Jesus. They love the way that he treats them, the way that he welcomes them, the way that he talks to them and what it is that he's saying. So they're all gathering around to him. In fact, Jesus is getting quite a lot of judgment from the kind of morality police of the day for how openly he's welcoming these people, how much he's loving them. And so you've got this crowd with this kind of morality police tutting at the back, and then these men and women in the front who are the outcasts, full of guilt, full of shame. And Jesus tells them a story. He says to them, there's a man who had 2 sons, and the younger son one day comes to his dad and says, Father, give me my share of the inheritance now. So he's basically saying to him, look, Dad, I don't really want to live with you anymore, but I do want your stuff, so can we just pretend that you're dead already? Sell the land, give me my money, and I can get out of here. Can you imagine what it would feel like to be the father? Can you imagine how much that would hurt? But Jesus says, strangely enough, that the father doesn't fly off the handle. He doesn't kick this guy out with nothing. He says yes. He sells the land, he gives them the money, he lets him go. And the son goes. And he gets as far away as he can from home. And he spends his money living it up, enjoying his independence, doing all the things that he would have felt guilty about doing back home. It's the whole lot, parties, prostitutes, whatever. But then his money starts to run out. And it seems that the new friends that he's made start to run out with it because when he ends up in need, no one helps him. He finds himself actually with nothing to eat, so hungry that he's working on a pig farm and he wishes he could eat the slops that he's given to the pigs, but no one gives him anything. No one really cares. And eventually he thinks to himself, well, maybe I should just go home because, there are servants back home who've got enough food to eat, and here I am, starving to death. I can never go back and be a member of the family after what I've done to my dad, but maybe if I beg him, he'll let me come back as a servant. So he starts the long walk home. He's broken and bruised, he's outcast, he's ashamed, hungry and guilty. But Jesus says that while he's still a long way off, the Father sees him. The Father has been waiting for him. He has been standing there every day, watching and waiting and weeping and hoping that his son was going to come home. And when he sees him, he just hitches up his robes and he runs. And he doesn't care that everyone in the village is pointing and laughing. Look at the old man run. He is just running for his son. And when he gets to him, he wraps him up and he looks him in the eye and he kisses him on the forehead. And the son starts his kind of rehearsed apology. He says, "Father, I'm sorry, I've sinned against you." And the father won't even let him finish. He just calls to his servant and says, "Quick, bring my best robe and wrap it round him. Give him his dignity back. Bring the family ring, put it on his finger so that everyone knows that this kid is back and he belongs. And bring some sandals because his feet must be killing him. And then go and get the biggest, best animal we've got and kill it and get it ready to eat because we are going to have a massive party. The whole village is invited because we need to celebrate. This kid is my son and I love him and he was lost, but now he's found." And Jesus kind of looks up at this crowd of morality police at the back and then these men and women full of guilt and shame at the front, and no one can miss what he's saying. He is saying, that's what God is like. More than that, he's saying, this is who I am. I am God running out to meet you in all of your mess and your guilt and your shame. I'm God running out to you, looking you in the eyes and saying, I love you and I want you to come home and be my child. Jesus is saying that God loves you no matter what, exactly as you are. And he's saying you don't need to run, you don't need to hide, you don't need to perform, you don't need to kind of clean yourself up first. All you've got to do is come home. And actually, I think this story is probably an inspiration for one of the best films that came out last year, a film called Lady Bird, directed by Greta Gerwig, that won a couple of Golden Globes. Brilliant film. And it's all about this last question I said we come to, of where do we get our identity from? Where do we get our sense of ourselves from? Where do we root that? Because it's all about this girl who's called Christine, but she calls herself Lady Bird. And she spends the whole film trying to kind of make an identity for herself, make a name for herself, trying to make herself someone who is loved. And she tries to do that by getting new, cooler friends. She tries to do it in kind of getting with boyfriends and sex. And at one point she's trying through artistic kind of self-expression, another point through academic achievement. And then eventually she manages to kind of move away from home entirely and get to a whole different city for uni so she can reinvent herself. But whatever she does all the way through the film, it never quite works, it never quite lasts. And I think film is sort of saying something to us about the way that if we try and build our sense of who we are, our sense of our identity on anything, you know, like our achievement or a particular relationship we have or our kind of cultural background or family history or religious background or on some kind of characteristic of ourselves, if we try and build our sense of ourselves on any one thing like that, it just can't take the weight. The weight that we put on it is too much for it, and it will fail us, it will let us down. And there is this beautiful moment at the end of the film where she's away in this new city and she calls her mum and dad and she gets the answer machine and she says, "Hi mum and dad, it's me, Christine. It's the name you gave me. It's a good one." And it's like she's finally realized that her whole life she was trying to make a name for herself, but she'd actually already been given one. And her whole life she'd been trying to make herself someone who was loved, but actually she was already loved. And I think it's quietly beautiful because in life so often we find that the thing that we are searching for, the thing that we are looking for everywhere, was actually right there waiting for us all along. And Jesus is saying to us that we don't have to create an identity for ourselves, make a name for ourselves, make ourselves someone who is loved, because actually there is a Father who has made us, who's named us, and who loves us. And he is right there waiting for us, watching and weeping and hoping that we are going to come home. And Jesus says if we come home, we will find, as we receive that love, that it actually sets us free to be ourselves, to relax and be ourselves. Mumford & Sons, I think, put it perfectly. They say, love, it will not betray you, dismay, or enslave you. It will set you free. Be more like the man or woman you were made to be. It's Jesus saying, if you will come home, if you will receive that love from the God who has made you and named you, then actually that love, just as you are, will set you free to be yourself. You can relax. And it's a love that you can trust enough to give yourself away to and know that actually that's not going to ruin your life. It's not going to enslave you. It's going to set you free. It's going to make you more fully alive. And actually, as you lose control, as you give yourself away to him, as you love him back, you will find that you are becoming more and more the person that you were made to be, the unique, glorious human being that you were made to be. So the question is, do you want to come home? And maybe some of us are thinking, well, I've just got so many questions, things that I don't understand or that I don't like about this. And we would love to hear your questions. Please text them in a minute. Or actually on your those kind of feedback forms on your chairs, there's a box you can tick. If you leave your number and tick the box that says, I'd like to chat with somebody, someone can meet up with you, buy you a coffee. You can spend as long as you like asking them your questions. And we just would love to help you think those things through. But maybe actually there are some people here today who are thinking, you know what? I do want that. I need that. That's too good for me to ignore that or kind of keep it at arm's length. And can I say, from my own experience, that decision to receive God's love and ask him for forgiveness, ask him to transform me, that is the best decision I've ever made in my life. And if you want to do that, if you want to come home, it's actually really simple. You can just come and ask him. He's right there. He's waiting. You could do it even right now. You could just take a moment to be thinking to yourself in your heart and to think to God, actually, yeah, thank you that you love me this much. Please forgive me for the way that I've hurt other people and I've ignored you. Please come, forgive me, transform me, make me into the person I was made to be. And if you want to do that today, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to chat to you. I've got a little booklet I could give to you that I think would be really helpful. I'd love to just know who you are so that I can be praying for you and maybe tell a mate who's a Christian so that they can celebrate with you and help you to work out what that would mean for you to start that kind of journey. But for now, we just have a minute to sort of turn to the person next to you, chat about what questions you have and text them in. I'd love to get through as many of those as I can today. And just chat about what struck you. What would you like to think about more from what we've been talking about, and what are your questions, and do text them in. That would be great. Thanks.
One's kind of long, so bear with me. Would you say too much freedom can be an intoxicating force that makes us behave narcissistically, and that accepting responsibility to be it to live by a set of rules, for example, accept Christianity, rule a kingdom, for example, Elsa, or accept that we made mistakes and work around that, would give us meaning that the pursuit of our raw desires wouldn't give us?
Brilliant. In fact, I've just realised that's actually very similar to the question that just came in, so we could do both of them at the same time, the one about following rules thing.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on freedom of following of Christ's teaching, its adherence to the path, freedom, compared to freely choosing vices and sin?
Brilliant. So, as best as I can understand, and if I don't answer your question rightly or helpfully, please do grab me afterwards. But I think that what those questions are both getting at is, what's the relationship between freedom and actually following the teachings, the commands of Jesus, of Christianity as a whole, or some other set of commands? Does that actually make us less free, or is there some way in which there's a deeper kind of freedom in following those commands than there is in just doing whatever we desire, following our own kind of instincts and so on? And I think that's a really good question, because I think there is a lot more to freedom than we normally think. If you think about something like a ballet dancer, right? When I watch a brilliant ballet dancer, not that I do very often, but if I do, right, you see it and you think, oh my goodness, they are amazing. And you realise I am not at all free to do what they are doing, right? They are expressing themselves amazingly, beautifully with their bodies in a way that I am not at all free to do. And how have they got that freedom? They have got that freedom by getting up pretty early every morning for years and going and training really flipping hard. And now they have a freedom that is glorious to watch, you know? Things the same with a free runner, right? The reason that they're called free runners is that they can basically run in a straight line wherever they want to go, because they've trained, they're strong enough, they're fast enough, they're brave enough to just do it, right? And so there's a bit where Jesus says to a crowd, he says, if you follow my teaching, then you will really be my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And what he's saying is that real freedom in life is about being able to be and do what we want to be and do, what we were made to be and do. And actually, loads of the time, if we're left to ourselves, we don't have the freedom to do that. You know, we value peace. We want to be peaceful people. And yet so often we're stressed and anxious. We value joy, and yet how often are we grumpy and miserable? We value love and selflessness and giving ourselves to other people, but how often are we actually selfish and we hurt even the people that we love and care about the most? Jesus is saying, if you're left to yourself, you're not strong enough to really be free. But if you come with me, if you follow me, if you listen to what I'm telling you, if you let me show you how it works to be a human being, if you trust me enough to do what I'm telling you, even when it feels weird, even when it feels wrong, I'm going to train you to be a fully alive human being who actually is what you were meant to be. And it's going to be a beautiful thing to behold. A much better freedom. You know, it's going to be like being a ballet dancer who is free to express themselves in a beautiful way, as opposed to being a couch potato who sat watching TV their whole life because they never felt like doing anything else, and now they're miserable and bored. So that's why I think that it's not at all the contrast between being free and following the teachings of Jesus. I'd invite you to read the teachings of Jesus and see how amazing and revolutionary they are. And these books are free for you to take away. They're just the shortest biography of Jesus. Take it, have a look, see what you think. I think it's real freedom.
Thanks. Could you give examples of what it practically means to become the person we were meant to be?
Brilliant. I mean, there are some ways in which that's going to be the same for every human being, because there are parts of what it is to be a human being that are universal, and that if we become the people we're meant to be, it's going to become kind of like David Foster Wallace and like Jesus were talking about. We're going to be people who are able to care more about somebody else than we care about ourselves. And that's a deep, deep kind of freedom. The freedom to be able to sacrifice my own sort of pleasure, comfort, interest to do something for someone else and see them come alive, see them blessed and loved and cared for by what I've done, I think that's a huge part of what it means, and we need a huge amount of strength that's not our own to grow into that. And then for different people, it'll be different things. I mean, for me, I've kind of gradually realized the more I've listened to Jesus' teachings, the more I've been around other Christians at church, discussed it, thought about it, prayed, read the Bible, the more I've realized that actually, you know, as a like a couple of years ago, still now, I was basically a very proud human being, and a lot of my sense of kind of fulfillment and drive in life was all about achieving things that made me look and feel impressive. And actually, in the last couple of years, Jesus has been really teaching me that what it means to be human, what it means to be fully alive, is much more about being able to genuinely love the person next to me. I got married a year and a bit ago, and that's been a huge lesson in this. Do I care more about going and doing something so that people will be impressed by me, or do I care more about being there for Rachel and being able to actually love her and look out for her? And it has been an amazing journey of discovering that I was an idiot, and this is loads better. And I've still got an absolute mile to go, and I think all of us do. But I'm so glad that I'm on the journey, and I'd love you guys to be on that as well.
Is it okay to accept love, for example, from our families and friends? Will that make us whole? Or do we have to follow Jesus and accept his love? What's the difference? Yeah,
that is a brilliant question. I almost wanted to spend time on it in the talk, but we didn't have time. Basically, I think that if we find ourselves in a life of mutual, genuine love with friends and family, often that feels pretty good, right? That feels pretty human. And that is because that is a significant chunk of what we were made for, because God is love. He's made us to love other people. It's a decent chunk of what we were made for. And so it feels all right. But I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and he was saying, imagine that you meet someone, they're a really good guy, a mate at uni, really good guy, really kind of generous, particularly when they're out, they're constantly buying people rounds, they're really generous with their money, lovely guy. And at one point, you kind of are with them just on their own, you're chatting, and you kind of pluck up the courage to say, look, mate, I've noticed that you're really generous with your money. Where's it all from? And they say, oh, it's in a trust fund. And they say, oh, right, okay, wow. Where's that from? And he goes, oh, it's my parents. And you go, oh, I'm sorry, if they passed away? He says, no. But to be honest, they put the money in the trust fund. I don't speak to them really anymore. In that moment, not only are you shocked by the way that that guy is treating his parents, but also every act of generosity and kindness that you've seen in the rest of his life is kind of tainted by that, isn't it? Because you realize that all this kind of kindness and love that he's showing, he's actually spending money that's not his. It's been given to him, and he has broken the relationship with the person who's given it to him in the first place. And can I say that every bit of love and joy and friendship and family kind of unity that we have is a gift, a borrowed gift in a sense from God. Because he is the source of all love, all life, all goodness, all joy. And if we enjoy those things, and we're a nice person, we love the people around us, but we cut ourselves off from him, we ignore him, not only is that a horrible thing to do to him, but it actually taints everything else that we do. And Jesus says, it's not enough. You need to turn to the person who gave you all of that love in the first place, and you need to find a love that goes deeper and lasts longer and is the source of all of the other loves that you enjoy. Because that's what you were made for, both. And if you ignore half of it, you're actually tainting the whole thing.